Hello and greetings, everybody. My name is Shwa, and I have my guest here, Celene Ibrahim, and we will be talking to her today. Assalamu alaikum and greetings, Celene.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being here. How you feeling? How you doing?
It's wonderful to be here today. I
Okay.
really appreciate the
Wasn't too
conversation.
bad to drive today.
No, thank you.
The weather is tricky nowadays, so you know. All right. I'll talk about some of parenting questions, parenting topic, and from there we will go to some, other questions and all. So let's begin with what made you first. Why don't you tell me about who you are and what do you do?
I hold a number of roles. So one is as a chaplain on a university campus where I work with Muslim students, and then a broader array of students, undergraduate, graduate students. I also work with the faculty and the administration of the school. And in addition to that, I'm working on my own studies and pursuing a doctorate, which should be complete by the end of this year, hopefully.
So that's the plan. So we can have another interview then once you're done. I
If
hope
I'm
so.
still standing.
You will be. You will be. So can you tell me about what is your doctorate in?
Yes. So my doctorate is in Arabic and Islamic studies, and within that I focus on gender studies. And so
Okay.
my dissertation itself is focused on the female figures in the Quran. Everyone from Hawa, Eve, who is the female progenitor, all the way through the wives and the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
Perfect. Wonderful. Peace be upon him. So what made you decide on this topic?
I wanted to write a topic for my dissertation that was going to be both spiritually fulfilling for me, intellectually fulfilling, and then also of use to a wider community.
Okay.
And so I oftentimes realized that people don't really know the Quran very well, even if they've been raised Muslim for a lifetime. Maybe they haven't actually taken the time or had the opportunities to study. So as I was thinking about a topic and knew I wanted to take up a topic in the realm of women and gender, I realized that there were all of these really rich female figures who are sometimes overlooked in terms of what is taught from the minbar, from the pulpit, and also overlooked because they appear in the backstories of Quranic narratives. So for instance, sometimes they're not named directly, but if you have had the time to study the Quran, you know when the Quran refers to a particular situation, it's referring to a woman who, for instance, asked a question and the Quran answers her. Or for instance, it's pertaining to a woman who had a very important role in the life of the early Muslim community. And so by way of studying these figures, I'm also revisiting early Islamic history.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So you're doing a lot. So could you tell a little bit about where were you born, and do you know about other faiths and knowledge of other faiths?
Yes. So I grew up in an area of the country in the Poconos between basically the New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania point of intersection. And I would say that the area when I was growing up was very homogenous. It was almost entirely white, almost entirely Christian. And I had the opportunity in that context to go to both private schools and public schools. And I spent a number of years at a Catholic school. And at that time, I wasn't Muslim. And so I very much participated in the life of the community. And I was an altar girl at the Catholic Church. And I had a very close relationship with my priest, who was very keen on doing social justice work and very keen on the sensibilities of the Catholic Church in terms of protecting the poor and protecting the disadvantaged. So those were big influences in my early years. And then I had the chance to go to a much more diverse school in New Mexico, actually. And so I spent a number of years in New Mexico. And this school was also peace and justice focused. So I had plenty of opportunities to be working in Habitat for Humanity and be working in mountain search and rescue and a whole wide array of projects.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So you have a lot of rich background and with which you are coming to another rich faith and culture, and so that's wonderful. Let's talk about your parenting. Like, what made you then? You have a child, one
Yes,
daughter?
I have a daughter who's just about 12.
Oh, wow. So your hands are full with the doctorate and the getting to be teenager, right?
Yes.
Not yet a teenager. So tell me about what made you decide to become a parent. I mean, why did you want to be a parent?
I wasn't even thinking about starting a family, and then I met a wonderful gentleman and we started talking about marriage, and just from my care and love for him, then I began to think, what would it be like to raise a young person?
And he is from?
Yeah, so he's from Egypt. I met
Okay.
him in Egypt. I was studying abroad at the time, learning Arabic, and not husband shopping, but it ended up that I found one.
That's good. That's good. Did somebody say that to you about husband shopping?
We were warned in our study abroad program not to accept any marriage proposals.
Oh, you were
specifically. I just misheard that part.
Okay, okay. Well, that's nice. So, how do you? Okay, tell me about what do you think about parenting? Is it selfless so far for you, or is it a selfish motive that you become a parent? Now you can talk from your perspective.
Yes, I think there's a deep biological urge that many people have to become parents, and I think that's probably tied to our nature and part as human beings who need to reproduce to continue our species. So I think there definitely is a biological aspect or element to it. At the same time, there's also, for me, in terms of thinking about whether it's selfless or not, I think certainly I definitely have what we would call an ego, or in Arabic we'd call it a nafs. So a part that has selfish desires. And ideally, from a Muslim framework, the idea is that you overcome selfish desires, and that this is part of the purpose of human life, is to struggle to overcome all of the more base desires so that you can elevate the self, or as other religions would say, be rid of the ego, or the harmful aspects of the ego. And so I think parenting definitely does have some of those egotistical elements about it. Certainly, I want to see my daughter succeed in things because I love her, because I care about her, and also because what she do reflects upon us as parents. So there's certainly that aspect that does have a more egotistical nature. And for instance, she's very keen on playing sports, and I oftentimes, as I'm sitting on the bleachers, hoping that she makes this foul shot, or makes this perfect serve. I have to check myself to make sure, am I caring about her well-being,
or you're caring about your so, because what happens is parents, it's their reflection, as you said, and also everything is projected to them, like this is like that's what you want, right? Do you know that what your daughter really wants might not be on the same page, or not the same desire or something? So so do you think that you are keeping that as she's growing older, that you are keeping that, like, yeah, I don't want her to do this, but she wants to do this?
Yes.
Any example, anything that you can?
Well, there's definitely some things that we as parents make her do, and we basically frame it as this is part of her responsibility. So for instance, she goes to an after-school math program because we want to challenge her and we want to enrich her. Probably if it were up to her, most definitely if it were up to her, she wouldn't necessarily want to go. But what we try to do then is make it fun and make it challenging, and show her why this is important, or why at least we feel this is important for her.
Do you do something that she wants to do, that you let her go into that program or whatever? Is there any?
This was my mother's strategy when she was raising me. I really wanted to be a gymnast when I was young, and so she made me practice piano. And if I practiced piano, then I could go to the gym and do my gymnastics. So I think I do some of that with Rahma. When she was little, ice cream would work, but
not anymore.
Doesn't work anymore.
Okay. How do you identify yourself as a person?
It always depends on the context. So in some contexts, I'll be called upon to be a representative Muslim voice, and so then I'm represented as the Muslim. On other contexts, I'm called on to be the representative female voice, and so then that's the primary identity.
And how are you here today? With which title?
Maybe in my full capacity.
Exactly. So you are here from being a human being, a person, not necessarily from any faith or tradition, but as a full capacity, as you said. That's good. Thank you for being here. Okay, so you were saying, sorry, you want to say anything else, or I will? Yeah, okay. So, are schools, in your experience so far with your daughter and yourself growing up in United States also, schools enough to teach you, build your character, make you intelligent or not, or like, how do you perceive schools in today?
When we were thinking about a place to live, my husband and I, we placed a lot of emphasis on what type of education would be offered in that place. And at the same time, we were thinking about financial concerns as well, because certainly there's any number of really great schools, but you also have to balance that in terms of your other life goals.
Exactly.
So, I mean, we value education extremely highly, and we shopped around a little bit, and we found what is a very wonderful charter school. And for my daughter, this is a great environment because the classes are much smaller and they can differentiate the learning slightly better than the school that she was in before, where I felt that they maybe were not able to challenge her enough in the areas that she would like to be challenged.
Okay. So it's good to pay attention to the schools and where you're sending them. So you have to become, if you were not before, but you have to be more conscious, more aware of what you're doing with your child and why you're sending them. Because once, let's say, even if you're not so aware of having a baby or a child, like once they are there in your life, I think it's time to be more aware of all the responsibilities, because you're bringing another human being in this world.
I give this advice to my younger friends who might be married but not yet have children. And I let them know when they're thinking about where they're going to call home, look at the school district, because if they're not satisfied with the school district, then they might end up moving again and having that hassle of trying to relocate at a later point.
That's true. Okay, let's come to a little bit of looking at the time and our conversation. I know we can go on and on, but we'll talk about a little bit about interfaith, intercultural, because you are in it also. Tell me about, do you think that our faith can be diluted if you learn about other faiths in your experience, because you are at Tufts also and you have a lot of experience with the young students and people. So what's your take on that?
Yes. For me, it's always been very important to ground my daughter in some type of faith tradition, but then also make sure that she has plenty of exposures to go out and learn other traditions in terms of making friendships with people across faith lines, and in terms of being in different spaces of worship, so that she can understand from an anthropological, from a sociological point of view, why is religion important to so many people across the globe.
But you're not afraid that she will not be a Muslim or this or the other? Are you concerned?
I think that she should be exposed to all of these different perspectives, and she should have to think about questions like, is Jesus, peace be upon him, a divine figure, or is he a prophet? Is all of these questions, I would rather that she sees all of the multiple ways of thinking about the world. And then I found the arguments that Islam builds from a rational point of view very convincing. So I would think that she would then be able to use her own intellect and decide.
Does she ask you such questions?
Oh, they have the best questions.
Really?
Rahma and her friends are very much, because I think they've been raised as minorities, and so they're very aware of what the dominant religious views of the society are. And so they're hyper aware of why they're different and how they're different. And I think there's a real a sense of Muslim identity in from what I see in her and her Muslim friendship group. And I think it's a positive thing.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. That's very good. So that if she's grounded. So do you think that if you're at home grounded and in whichever faith, any other Christian faith, Jewish faith, but if you are not so hyper about it and have some grounding at home, and then they can, of course, learn about others, and some people say, well, they can then decide whatever they want to do, right? So
I
it's
think
sometimes a little difficult for parents to go with that. So.
Well, on an epistemic level, just thinking about the way in which we learn and the way in which we acquire information, I would rather her at this stage in her development, at a time in which she's really asking big questions about the world, I would rather have these conversations with her now, so
rather than shun her.
Yes, and I really think that questioning is a part of the learning experience, and I have
that's very important. I want you to reiterate that, say it again. That question, good questions also, but questioning is important. It's whether it's about your faith, shouldn't be threatened by it. Even if you're a Muslim or any other faith, or Christian or Jewish or Hindu, or you shouldn't be like, oh, don't ask questions, but that's how it is. That's how it is. I think that's how you learn, right?
Just as a perfect illustration of this point, I think I'm also teaching a seminary course, and in this seminary course, I have a particular woman who just wrote in her reflection paper, this is the first time that she feels like she's in an environment where she can ask questions. And so oftentimes, I mean, this is someone who's in seminary, and so has obviously have a faith commitment for a long time, but is just now feeling that the environment is, in her own words, safe to ask questions.
And also depends on the individual. Now I have come to that. Even if they had the environment before, maybe they were not aware of asking questions. It is very subjective to the person, the individual. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It might be that time, but that is her journey. That's her.
And I think too, different life experiences just bring about different types of questions.
Definitely. Okay, let's move to some, which I call some thought-provoking questions. And then we will go to the last leg of questions, and that I ask, in fact, okay, so tell me, what are the things that money can't buy?
I think there's an axiom that money can't buy happiness.
Yes.
There's also some Visa commercials that say some things are priceless.
Okay.
But, for my own faith commitment, money is a means to things. Okay. And so we're encouraged as Muslims to spend and not to hoard, because if you don't make use of money, it has no value. The value of having, the ability to spend is that you spend. And also, considering wealth more broadly, then we have all these things in English, a wealth of any number of things. And I always go back in my early years to a very formative memory. And I had a dear friend, this is probably about third grade, who had many, many brothers and sisters and was being raised in a single parent household. And so finances were very difficult because of the situation. And I remember I once asked her, I said, Sarah, why don't your pillows match your comforter?
Wow.
Because in my world, from my privileged kind of bubble, and my mother was very color conscientious, so everything matched. But I hadn't, it was just this question. And she said to me, maybe my pillows don't match, but you love this house because there's so much love in it. And I realized that I did love spending time there because I was treated as part of the family, and because...
And she answered that. This was quite mature.
She knew because she had been raised with those values, and her mother... maybe she couldn't provide matching pillow sets, but she provided an environment in which there was. So the environment is more important rather than the material stuff. And I think we forget this at sometimes, and especially when there's Pier 1 catalogs and being delivered to our homes, and to look at that and to say the ideal life is when your home looks like this, or when you drive this particular car, and it's very easy to fall into these types of patterns of being because we're being conditioned, and our psychology has been studied to make us want to purchase and to make us want to be part of the consumerism.
That's true. That's true. Can you tell me about so let's move from there to what do you like about yourself in your life?
I'm supposed to be modest here.
Well, no, it's up to you.
I think having good self-esteem, I think that's a part of learning how to come into the world and realizing the ways that you're similar and different from other people, and realizing what gifts you have and what your working areas are. So I give a lot of thought to myself in terms of character and how to improve it, and I think patience in life is very important, and I value that, and I try to cultivate that. So that's what you like about yourself? I think I'm pretty patient. I don't know if everyone around me would agree.
Well, we'll test her today.
All right, we're going to be done with this interview.
What do you then? Anything that you would like to change about yourself in that line of question?
I think one edge that I've been working on is I'm a person who's very kind of compliant, and I like to say, yes, I can do that, or sure, I can do that. And so I think part of self-esteem is also learning how to set boundaries so that you're able to articulate when a particular ask from someone else is really pertinent to your life and your priorities, and to be able to say no. And I think for many women that I speak to, this is a particular challenge because a lot of the culturation in various societies in various places around the world, women are acculturated to be the ones who say yes, the ones who will go the extra mile to please everyone. And so I think learning how to sometimes stand the ground and say, no, I can't do that, or not today, or not right now.
Yeah, it's good to learn. All right. A question about relationships. So being who you are, I mean, tell me about, in different capacities you can talk about this, or your personal relationship. How do you maintain relationships? Something that we can learn from your experience?
Yes. I mean, I go back to the patience part, because I think relationships, they take time to cultivate, and they take constant care. And I grow plants at home, so I kind of can make an analogy to the plants, is that if you don't give them the proper amount of light and the proper amount of water, and every plant's slightly different, so what you give one plant is not what you give another plant, and some plants like bright light, and some like to be just kind of in direct light, and people are like that too. And so I think that to know the person who you're in relationship with, or who you're seeking to be in relationship with, there's an element of having to know what their psychology is, and what makes them operate, and what are their strengths and their weaknesses.
Okay, good. Nice analogy. What is a quick, well, I don't want a quick answer, but I think with the time constraint, we might have to go quickly, but what is marriage in your opinion, and is it necessary to marry?
Yes. There's a prophetic saying, so I'll go with this prophetic saying, and it's that marriage is half the faith. And so after being married for a while, I understood this, I think, more, because in this marriage, you're called to grow, and you're called to grow as a couple, and you're also called to grow in your own individual development. And so I think there's other ways that relationships require us to grow, but marriage in particular, because of the strength of the partnership, and because it touches all areas of life, and because it requires ideally a commitment over a lifetime, or at least a number of years. It's, I think, one of the most powerful commitments that human beings make to one another.
So now that because you're married, so I think I should have a separate topic on, total topic covering this, topic of marriage, covering having you and people who are not married and have a discussion, because this is a prophetic tradition that you quoted or mentioned, but not necessarily in the scripture that it says that you have to. So I wanted to differentiate between that it's not necessary, but we will talk about it again. I think I would love to have your more detailed opinion and discussion on it, but I just wanted to touch upon it.
No, it's certainly not necessary, and we have figures in Islamic history. Ibn Taymiyyah, for those who know, is one of the most profound jurists and thinkers, and he never married. And so there's plenty of there's no
so he didn't. Okay,
obligation to marry, but it is highly encouraged. And there's no celibacy in Islam either, in terms of a celibacy as having
faith or
a merit over not.
Okay, so coming to the last leg of questions, and I hardly have a minute or two. So give me any message of hope before you leave. What's the message of hope you can give us today?
We started talking about parenting, and I know to point to children is always the quintessential a beacon of hope for the future. And but I think that it's a scary world in some ways, but I think of the joy that I see in young people, and it reminds me to continue living with that sense of joy and their sense that the world is vast and that their future is broad.
Wonderful. Thank you. And my last question is, what lights you up?
Well, I have to say, I mean, it might be a bit of a predictable answer for me, but Islam is really the thing that I've really devoted my life to, and it informs everything else in my life. And I feel very fortunate to have been able to learn Islam and to have so many amazing Muslims in my life.
So it lights you up to be in this zone of Islam and learning about it and all. Okay, interesting.
To each their own.
Thank you so much for your time, for your questions, and I hope you had a good time. I had certainly a wonderful time. So this was my guest, Celene Ibrahim, and hope you enjoy, listening, watching her, and till next time. Thank you.